Okay, John, I think we're good.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm John Reed, United Launch Alliance Chief Technologist. And Tom?
Yeah, I'm Tom Martin. I'm with Aerojet Rocketdyne. I'm a Director of Strategy and Business Development in our Space Business Unit. Happy to be here.
So if we could go ahead and put up the slides. We're here to talk about the Perseverance launch and just wanted to share a little bit of background. Go ahead and go to the next. United Launch Alliance is a joint venture of Lockheed and Boeing. And actually, our systems and our heritage systems have flown missions to every planet in the solar system. One of the key things that we've learned from this has been that we partner with these government agencies, NASA and the NASA centers, to try and make each mission execute all of the science that they want to do at the best, with the best outcomes that we can provide them. Why don't we go to the next? So we have actually been flying to Mars for a very long time. This was our 20th mission, all successful, going to Mars. And really, this has been enabled by our partnership with companies like Aerojet Rocketdyne. They have provided the thrust systems, the control systems for every one of these launches. One of the things that we talked about yesterday that Tori brought up was some of the constraints on flying to Mars. And in the lower left of this graphic, you can see where the Earth is in relationship to Mars when we launch and when we arrive. And this is really enabled by doing a Hullman transfer, which is the most energy efficient path to get to Mars. By doing that, you end up with the minimum delta V to depart Earth. You basically raise apogee so that it's intersecting with Mars's orbit when the planet gets there. And that gives you the lowest energy insertion into Mars or descent into the Martian atmosphere. For a lot of those missions, you end up having to either do correction burns on the way, and specifically a fairly large burn when you get to Mars in order to stay in orbit, or you're entering the atmosphere with all of that delta V being converted to heat on the aerobraking system. Why don't we go to the next slide? So just wanted to show a little bit of graphics on the hardware that was used to fly Mars 2020 Perseverance. You can see in the upper center, the payload itself. That's the Perseverance vehicle with its heat shield facing up. And you can see around it our payload fairing with the blue acoustic tiles. It ended up needing a 5-meter fairing to be able to fit the width of that payload inside there. And so those tiles are used to control the environment to what the payload needs for the launch environments and mitigating that. You can also see on the left-hand fairing, the payload fairing door that was used to put the Aerojet, the thermal RTG, radioisotope thermal generator, the power source for Perseverance in late in the flow. And of course, you can see the ULA 541 launch vehicle on the right-hand side launching Perseverance. Next. And of course, I should point out the fact that that was our 140th launch, all successful. The other piece of that is our success is really judged by our customers. And so part of what we've gone through is developing systems to try and give them the best insertion accuracy we can. That's really got two contributors to it. One is the shutdown impulse from the RL-10 rocket engine that's on the upper stage. And the other is the navigation system that I've helped develop. The main thing you can see on this chart is within the range of what we said we could provide them from a C3 perspective, the energy that we departed with, we were less than 3% of that for the injection accuracy on this mission. What that really translates to is a very low correction delta V that the payload has to then provide on the path to Mars. Another thing that's worth noting is when you're flying to Mars, the launch vehicle, the upper stage, cannot hit the planet because of planetary protection, which means NASA ends up targeting the launch vehicle's flight to be off of planet so that we will fly past Mars and just keep going into deep space. By having a better accuracy on our system, it means that you can actually move that target place closer to the planet, so that then reduces the delta V that the Perseverance has to provide for the planetary atmospheric entry in those wonderful 7 minutes of terror. And I think that pretty much sets the stage. So we're looking forward to having questions and discussing them.
Yeah, and John, I'll go through a little bit of Aerojet Rocketdyne's role in the mission, because we play key roles across the different phases. Obviously, as you outlined a bit during launch, Aerojet Rocketdyne and ULA have been longtime partners across the launch vehicles for the Atlas vehicle and the mission, both Curiosity and Perseverance. We provided the RL-10 upper stage engines to the Centaur vehicle, 4 solid rocket boosters on the core stage, each generating almost 400,000 pounds of thrust. Helium bottles to provide pressurant across Centaur and the core stage, first stage, as well as reaction control engines to help orient Centaur for all those critical burns you talked about. When we move on to the spacecraft itself, our role starts during the initial entry phase. We have what we call the MR-107 thrusters. They're about 70 pounds of thrust each, and they help orient the spacecraft about 10 minutes before touchdown. And then that's when things really get exciting during that descent stage. We have what are called the MR-80 thrusters, and I know those are really exciting names. But 8 of those are the main propulsion for what's called the sky crane. I think most people know that the way Perseverance actually gets down to the surface is that there's a propulsion system that hovers about 25 feet above the ground under the power of these thrusters, and then they lower Perseverance to the bottom. Those thrusters are pretty amazing. They can throttle from about 800 pounds of thrust all the way down to about 1% of that. So they're pretty amazing thrusters. They actually go back all the way to the Viking lander, which was when they were originally developed. So those things, the MR-80s will then, once the Perseverance is down on the surface, they'll cut the cords, and the thrusters will take the descent stage and make sure it stays far away from the rover itself. I think we saw cool pictures of that on the last mission. And then finally, the Perseverance rover is actually powered by what we call the MMRTG, the multi-mission radioisotope thermoelectric generator, which is quite a mouthful to say. The key aspect there is the multi-mission. It was actually developed to be used both for surface operations, where you have to deal with atmospheric considerations, as well as deep space missions where it operates in a vacuum. And a little bit about the MMRTG, it generates about 110 watts. Primarily that goes to power systems as well as the batteries. It also provides heat to the instrumentation. And the way it works, it's actually a very simple device. It's fueled with plutonium-238, which naturally decays, generating heat. That heat is essentially used in what we call a thermocouple, which converts that heat directly into electricity. So it's a very simple device, very reliable. I think, in fact, coolest RTG application I can think of is the Voyager spacecrafts. Now, I think, almost 50 years out, the RTGs are still powering those spacecraft in deep space. So kind of summary, that's AR's role. We've played a role in every successful Mars mission to date for NASA. We are very proud of our legacy of supporting exploration, and in particular Mars. We're very excited to continue to support that. So with that, I think open to questions.
So I see a couple have come up. I did want to reiterate, I think part of the key to Perseverance's success has been the team relationship that AR and we have. This really is a team sport where it takes a whole community with different skill sets to make this kind of a mission a success. So hats off to AR and to all of the teammates that have helped make this happen.
John, that's absolutely true. I mean, as you know, I'm educating myself about all the products that AR brings to the table for these missions. You begin to see how complex these missions are, how many different systems, capabilities, industry partners all have to come together to make this one mission work. It's pretty amazing if you think about it that 140 million miles away from Earth, all these systems are working in harmony to do these missions.
And I guess we did have the first question from Janet Ivey, who's the president of Explore Mars. Maybe you can have some insights into it. She was asking how much of the Viking architecture went into the designs of Perseverance.
Well, I can speak for Aerojet Rocketdyne's part. Like I mentioned, those critical thrusters, the MR80s, which actually are what are lowering Perseverance to the surface. Like I mentioned, those were originally developed for the Viking lander for a very similar application. And as you guys know, one of the challenges with propulsion, rocket propulsion, is deep throttling. Engines don't necessarily like to throttle over a very wide range. So, like I said, an engine that can throttle from 100% down to 1% is very unique. And for Perseverance, the thrusters were actually modified quite a bit from the Viking days to make them more reliable. Also, mission unique for the specific Perseverance application. A lot of the thrusters that support with RCS, like the MR107s I mentioned, they have heritage all the way back to these types of missions as well.
I think also a lot of the experience that we've had with every one of these missions filters into the, iterative and incorporation of innovation and evolution of every one of these systems. In some ways, to me, that's one of the advantages of having Mars first and the whole Mars or Moon to Mars scenario is going to the Moon shortens that innovation cycle because you get the feedback within a matter of days instead of 7 to 18 months before you see the outcome of what you've done, either for the delivery of the science or executing it on the planet's surface. I did want to go back. There was one question that came in earlier from Jack. When will we have reusable boosters? And I did want to touch on that a little bit. We are still developing our smart reuse for our Vulcan engines. We're doing that as a public-private partnership with NASA Langley. They are developing the HIAD, the hypersonic inflatable aerodynamic decelerator, another mouthful, for slowing payloads with aerobraking at Mars. And so we're flying a smaller 6-meter version of that system on a flight demonstration coming up in another year and a half or so, called Lofted. That's a LEO demonstration of that technology. We would then, for our reuse, grow that to a 12-meter, and for NASA going to Mars and bringing large payloads down to the surface would go to an 18-meter. And so we're kind of working together to mature those technologies that both would be used for reusing our booster engines as well as delivering more payloads to Mars in the future. So it's kind of, again, a teaming relationship that really helps move technologies forward.
Yeah, and if I could comment on reusable boosters, I mean, it's a topic that we discuss quite often. And you can see the highly accurate SLS model I have in the background there that my son built. When we're looking at the architectures that are going to take us to the Moon and Mars in particular, the lift requirements are so large. SLS can lift 40 metric tons to cislunar space. When you start talking about the performance hits that occur with respect to reusability, it starts to become a real challenge. And so that's a key thing, right? Reusability makes sense, we think, for certain applications, but for other applications where performance is really the key, expendable systems still trade very well.
Sure. There's always going to be a penalty for reuse of any kind, right? You've got to have the weight of that reusable the retrieval components. And so you're giving up payload performance. And if you're maxed out or selling every ounce, that's always going to be more valuable than the recovery hardware that you're
right.
flying.
And the reason that's important, we look at the architecture, right? The launch is just a piece of an overall architecture. And like we were just talking about with Perseverance, all these different systems, all these different capabilities have to come together to make the mission. And we've looked at the amount of complexity that has to be added when you take, essentially you end up taking smaller pieces, right? And putting all those pieces together becomes more challenging from an architecture perspective. So again, when we talk launch only makes sense in the context of the architecture, what we're trying to accomplish the mission. And for cislunar activity and for Mars, having as much lift capability as you can get, having a big payload fairing, all that stuff plays better for the overall architecture.
Okay. There was a question on the describing the entry, descent, and landing, range trigger, et cetera. Do you have insights into some of those details?
Only what I read and prepped for this. I know that for Perseverance, they added a terrain relative navigation system. So I think versus the prior mission, they're going to be more aware of what's below them, and essentially going to be able to be active in terms of moving, so that they don't land on something they don't want to, like large rocks or other things that probably wouldn't be very good for the rover. But
no, the terrain relative stuff and the whole EDL has been advancing. I'm a tech fellow in guidance, nav, and control, and we frequently have our forums get together and talk about the EDL systems. And especially that the TRN stuff has been a hot topic with a lot of energy across the whole of NASA to mature that and bring it to market so that they can both have it for this kind of mission, but then have it available for any of the future commercial missions going to Mars or the moon.
Right. Hey, John, it looks like there's an interesting question on the sample return campaign. I think it's important. One of the things that Perseverance is going to do here is caching samples for a potential sample return mission. And so that's kind of the next step from Aerojet Rocketdyne's perspective. That's key because a lot of that is enabled by propulsion. You're going to have to basically set a rocket down on the surface, collect the samples, and then that rocket is going to have to get all the way back to Earth with the samples. So that's going to be a very challenging mission to mount. So really excited to see in the planning phase going on with that, and from our perspective, how propulsion is going to help solve that challenge.
It'll be exciting. We did get a question about what brought us to building rockets, propulsion, and wanting to advance space exploration. I will freely admit I'm a Star Trek baby from the old days. And I've been doing rockets in Denver since 1986. To me, it's really cool to be able to actually develop and mount a mission in a matter of 1 or 2 years. And a lot of my counterparts on the satellite side will spend their whole career basically pursuing one mission.
Yep. I guess from my perspective, I'm a slightly different vintage, but my grandfather actually gave me a copy of Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and I don't know how many times I read through that as a kid, and that's partly what sparked my interest in this field and in engineering. So it goes way back, and I guess I'm actually a Star Trek: The Next Generation fan. That's kind of where I grew up.
Yeah, I'm actually a fan of The Expanse these days.
Oh, that's a good one for sure.
To me, the future in cislunar space is just incredibly bright. There's so many opportunities, both commercially and for science and for humanity in general. And so thinking about what that architecture, as you were saying, really needs to be to enable that future is kind of the fun part of this job that I have.
Right. Absolutely. Plus, I just kind of have an engineering brain. I guess my wife always makes fun of me for looking at things through the engineering lens. She's in the creative arts, so we have a very diverse viewpoint on the world.
That's awesome. That kind of gives you that good balance.
Well, and that's the other thing you see is just how diverse the skill sets you need. We always think of space exploration as being science and engineering driven, but it takes absolutely every skill set to get this done, from the political aspects, the communication aspects. I think Victoria actually, answered a question about why ULA sponsors Humans to Mars. And it was that outreach, right? Everything we do is backed by the public. And at the same time, what we do inspires the public. So there's a really important feedback that we need to be out there and communicate what we're doing.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I feel really energized by the public outreach that I get to do and all the conversations I have, both with public, with school students, with college graduates, and just sharing that vision for the future. Let's see if there was one last question or not. And I don't think I said vaccine architecture, so I'm not sure what I said now on one of the questions there.
Oh, there's one.
That's a good question.
I will take that one. One of the most interesting things going on right now is in the area of nuclear thermal propulsion. There's actually kind of a resurgence in the interest in nuclear thermal propulsion. It's an area that Aerojet Rocketdyne has participated in, since the beginning, through the early 70s and work that was done there to today. So we are working both with NASA Marshall as well as DARPA on several programs to advance nuclear thermal propulsion. And actually, right now it's in the trade space for the human portion of the Mars architectures, how we would get the humans to Mars as quickly as possible. And so we're looking at an engine that would be about the equivalent of an RL-10 in thrust, about 25,000 pounds of thrust, fueled by hydrogen, offers essentially twice the miles per gallon of a very high performance liquid hydrogen engines. So that's one of the very exciting things that I think will be needed for actually mounting a Mars campaign.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun. We're also supporting some of those efforts from a ride perspective. And so it's kind of like the roles get reversed occasionally, where we're, in the passenger seat, as it were, in this development and looking for how can we help move the technology forward.
Right. Working with ULA, I mean, one of the key technologies we need for nuclear thermal rockets, since they are hydrogen fueled, is the ability to store hydrogen for very long periods of time. And that's where I think ULA is one of the leaders in cryo fluid management.
Yeah, that's kind of our forte, with having Centaur upper stages with hydrogen and oxygen in liquid form for long periods of time.
Yeah, I kind of think of a nuclear thermal propulsion stage as basically a Centaur where you just pull off the oxygen tank.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're about out of time here. So I would like to thank everyone for their questions and look forward to future opportunities to engage with you all.
Yeah, ditto. It's always fun to be on these panels and be able to talk about what we do.